Hi, welcome to Book Sandwich Den. Janet Henderson, our usual moderator, is out sick today, so I'm filling in for her. My name is Peggy Wolf. I'm delighted to be here today, and I'm delighted to introduce Mike Perkins, who will discuss The Overstory by Richard Powers. If you have questions during his presentation, please include them in the chat on your screen, and I will ask those questions after his presentation. Mike is the Director of Operations for Up With Trees. He worked for the city of Tulsa for 25 years and served over a decade as the city's urban forester. He holds a BS in horticulture from Oklahoma State University, is a certified arborist, and served as chair of the Oklahoma Urban and Community Forest Council. Mike's main hobbies are turning his yard into an urban oasis and visiting the national parks. He's been to over 300. Welcome, Mike.
So, getting going with this book, really didn't know what to think of it. I am very pleased that I was reached out to after doing The Hidden Life of Trees. And I'm glad to bring the perspective of a forester into what the author was trying to tell us with this story. So, as I got going and started reading, the first section of the book was called Roots. And this is my sort of brief synopsis of what that was going on. So basically it's like a lost communication level between man and nature. Trees are tuned in and work with Mother Earth to create a working symbiotic relationship. As humans, do we? Is the question that I came up with from reading this first section. I'll go over an overview. Reading this first section, it was a little odd to me how it was set up. And then after going through it, how he addressed each character, then it did make more sense to me after getting further into a book. So a breakdown of the characters, how I see them. Nicholas, I'll call him Hal, it could be Hole. Reading on him, it's the sort of the tying together of memories of one's past, present, and future. The struggles that make one stronger, or if God sees fit, this time on earth is taken. Also, the saplings died, and the last remaining chestnut tree represents to me the children that passed away and the lone descendant that actually did stay on the farm to carry out what the father had created. With Mimi Ma, the mulberry tree in another place, so many riches to the family it brought, but now in its new setting, no material riches but memories much richer than the silk. Its slow demise with no cure signals the demise of the old life that was once known and summons the return to his ancestors. With Adam Apic, interesting how the family, as a child was born, actually planted a tree for each child. So there's 5 different trees with 5 different personalities. And, the question I had was, can trees actually determine who we are? In this case, Adam was the maple, which can be a fast growing but weak wooded tree, actually had the most growth and strength in life compared to his siblings at the end of his section. With Ray Brinkman and Dorothy Cazalet, these people who know nothing about trees, like so many people in the world, actually, the first link with nature is hiking the Appalachian Trail with them. Their relationship together is a struggle, like most forces in nature, trying to be symbiotic with each other. He fosters their time together by planting trees in their yard as a means to nurture things since they can't have kids. The plants represent to them their family on their property. With Douglas Pavlicek, being a witness in Vietnam to the mass killings of forest with the tree killing stuff, and then falling out of this aircraft and actually having a tree save his life. In the end, he replants vast expanses of forest to save and replenish actually what man has destroyed. Neely Mehta, finding a tree to escape into after his altercation at school with his teacher. And even though he had never climbed a tree before, he climbs up in it to escape his punishment. Falling out of the tree, he is crippled, but still finds a way through his world of circuits and silica. And the realization that trees are all characters and can be made into a world where others can escape into, even if it's a virtual world. Patricia Westford, being different from childhood. And though the love and education of the natural world with her father, she dives into the natural world knowing that without trees, man would not exist on this earth. And there was a great quote in there in her section that said, "The clearest way into the universe is through the forest wilderness." And I thought that was very, there's a great quote in there. In this section, it reminds me a lot of The Hidden Life of Trees, but with the human element thrown into the story of how I saw this. So that was sort of my summation of Roots and the characters leading up to the rest of the book. I said, after I got through that and started reading the next sections, everything to me started falling into place. So when we go into the next section of the book, which is trunks, in the forest business, trunks, the intertwining with this book of lives of lost souls searching for meanings to life. Brought together with trees, trunks are strong. With the pairing up of these individuals to take on the task of saving these trees, they become strong and united with their mission. Now, the flip side of that, and this is coming with some forestry terms, when two trunks actually grow into one, it's called codominance. And the bad thing with codominant trunks, they exist, but when put under strain, they fail. This can be used as an analogy with what happened with some of the characters in there. Moving on with the section of the crown. To me, the crown actually represents the current day-to-day trials and tribulations, where roots give a foundation to a tree or one's upbringing, and a trunk can give support and strength. The crown is what currently goes on visually in the present. It's actively expanding and dealing with the day-to-day events that are out in the open. If something is making the crown decline, one must look at the roots for the cause. And this section had a lot of that going, starting to tie all these stories of how these individuals actually came in and started meeting each other, forming their together of what they have done and their mission as what they saw in life, what they needed to do to save the trees that they felt were taken by man unjustly on that. It was a very good section of the book. I really enjoyed that. The author, I thought, had a way of really sort of, tying and bringing a lot of this together. I'd never read any of his books before, but I said the deeper and deeper I got into this, I was sort of really seeing what he was trying to tie in and bring with all of this. With the area of the seeds, which was the final part of the book, in the plant world, seeds are the future to a species survival. They represent a new beginning to life. And in the Overstory, a new beginning symbolizes the taking of on what these individuals had actually gone through. So, for some of it, the new beginning actually was going to prison for the crimes that he had been convicted of. Also, the new beginning to life for a few of these others individuals was the actually of having their life be able to go on since Adam actually took the punishment of going to jail for the other people and never gave them up. So they had a whole new setup to life where they could actually go on and start all over again. This was especially the case for like Mimi Ma, as she just contemplated of what had been done and what she had done and where she could now take her life. Also the new chapter dealing with Neely was going and creating the virtual world that he did, where actually, this is something new to mankind on the digital world, but still being able to tie in, evolution with increased digital life that mankind is creating. Douglas, his guilt actually of betrayal and being thrown in prison, for him, his freedom was taken away, but being in prison, he was actually able to study, university studies dealing with trees. And this, in the end of when he was able to get out of prison, would lead to a new start and beginning in life to him as well. And then, the death of Ray. These were some characters that really, until the end of the book, I had a hard time sort of tying them together of what they really may be and deal with in this book. And reading the book, they had a very strained relationship. But when he had the stroke, it brought Dorothy a lot closer to her husband and caring for him, and then watching the trees that they had planted in their yard. And I'll use the term sort of go rogue, because they just sort of let them go, and being able to look out every day and seeing the trees grow, watching the wildlife that was coming into their yard, the struggles they were putting up with the municipality, wanting them to maintain their yard in a manner, for a neighborhood. So it was really neat how it was tied in. Before his stroke, he actually wanted to go out and have trees have rights, and he never had a chance to do that because of his stroke. The very end of the book, I was sort of thrown off by that a little bit on really how, that sort of ended in there, with Nicholas and stuff. And so, in the end, when he did his giant sculpture, and actually what was created was the word still, that really threw me off. So I actually went in and actually had to find out what the different meanings of the word still was. And these are the ones that I actually came up with that I thought the author was trying to portray. So the first one is not disturbed, which comes a lot to what they were trying to actually save, was to not disturb the forests. To put an end to, which actually could go to put an end to the cutting down of these large expanses of old growth forest. And then the last one is to arrest the motion of. So after finding those definitions, it sort of made a little bit more sense what the author was trying to portray there, at the end of the book on that. So, going through all the chapters, on that, like I said, at the first, it was sort of a little confusing to me. But then tying all this in and thinking of a tree as a whole, starting with the roots, the trunk, and the crown, all that, and to sort of knowing what they all do and coexist with each other at the end really made a lot of sense of that. So I want to read after I read the first section of Roots, I actually was inspired to write this poem of what I sort of felt that the author was trying to portray. And it actually, stick with me here if I have a little trying moment with this, but this last week I lost my mother, and this poem has a lot deeper meaning now with it. So it's called Roots. There was a man who thought he was a tree. He put down roots and said, "This is where I want to be." As the years went by, he witnessed many things. Sure, there were times that he wished he had wings. The birds that visit him might nest and hang for a while, but then they'd fly off and travel many a mile. He thought, wouldn't it be great to see what they see, instead of just hanging close to this piece of earth where I chose to be? Standing in the old familiar place really wasn't that bad at all. He'd watch the young saplings playing and having a ball. They'd wave their leaves at him and tell this sentinel high. This would reinforce to him that this is where his roots should lie. As he aged and his rings grew wide, new trees moved in and were close to his side. He tried gazing through the field at where he chose to be, but now he was in a forest with so many other trees. So now this rural area from where he was, like flowers in spring, now have bees all abuzz. Could this now be the cherished place of past memories where his roots have grown deep? Like quenching raindrops from heaven, the man did surely weep. The moral to this is, be happy that we all exist with a place to take hold. As we grow tall, we see new things that our eyes can behold. The all-encompassing reality is we all will exit this earth. So cherish all experiences that you have, starting at the time of your birth. So that's sort of my summation of the book. I know I went through it a little fast. I'd be glad to take questions from anybody that might have questions dealing of how I sort of viewed the book as a forester on there, and anything else that y'all might have.
Mike, we appreciate your being here. Our sympathies to you at the loss of your mother. I know how difficult that is. So your being here is that much more special. Several people have mentioned how much they're enjoying the trees, the video in the back of the slideshow. We really appreciate that. And here's a question in general about your take on the book in relation to the care of trees. And the question is, are there any issues with America's, Oklahoma's, or Tulsa's care of trees that you wish the author had presented better or in a different way?
Having a discussion about the care of trees actually today, I thought it was very interesting in the book through the area of Patricia, where she was talking about actually the care of the trees. And as a part of the tree dies or a tree falls, that actually how much more life is actually in the dead and falling wood. And, of the trees. Also, the fact of when they were actually up in the tree trying to save the giant sequoia, all the different life forms that they found, in the tree that was just most people would not think of. So really, when it comes to care of trees, in an urban setting in the city where we're at, you sort of have to take and have a balance with the care of the trees. Now, if you do have a dead section of a large tree, just 2 houses up from me, I have a barred owl in a giant bur oak. So if those people that actually would remove the hollow in that tree to make it safe, then that owl would have no place to roost. Now we can't have, areas in the city with falling stuff and a lot of dead wood, in trees. I completely understand that, but anything else that would be sort of outside of the city scope in a rural area, I think it is best to leave trees as natural as they can be to accommodate all those things of life that actually take on trees as a home or food, or for whatever they do, and sort of throw in that whole symbiotic relationship that I was talking about with things. Things are so intertwined together with trees and nature, whether it's through mammals, insects, lichens, mosses, funguses. It's just, there is a lot of things that really rely on the tree, and not just man like us, and everything else that's living, to get the oxygen from the trees.
Thank you. I'm reminded now of a lot in that book about that very issue. We've got several more questions. Sherry wants to know from the book what crime sent Adam to jail. And she also wants you to know that your presentation and your poem has made her ready to read the book. She compliments you and your poetry.
Well, thank you. Well, when Adam was actually, thrown in jail, I was, I don't want to say a little disappointed in it. How he got sort of tied into all this, trying to write his, get his doctorates on psychology, and then getting tied in with everybody. They all had well-meaning to it. I think in the end, if nothing else, it was the death of, of the lady, Maidenhair, that really struck with his long sentence. I was, shocked that the sentence that he was giving was as long as it was, for him in the book. Of course, Douglas was sort of the guy being caught first, and working with the authorities, got a much reduced sentence even for the same crime. So knowing what Douglas had gotten, and then what the jury had given Adam, I thought was unjust in that. Yes, did they do some bad things? Yes, I guess you could call them bad things. They try to destroy, a would-be ski lodge in it. I thought, as the story was written, not anything against the author, I think that was sort of a misguided thing of what they would have done, and then in the end, Adam be arrested for. I thought it might be something, if somebody was that going to happen to it, it would have actually happened in more related to actually the trees somehow, and obstructing the people from doing their work.
I have several more compliments about the poem. Norman wants to know if you wrote it for this presentation.
I did. Actually, I'm a guy that for years, and actually decades, did not like giving speeches. And up until the last couple of years, I actually started writing poems. Actually, after I read that first section of Roots, it took me about 2 hours maybe to write that poem. And to me, it was sort of, I actually wrote it as a sort of a summation to that section of the book. And then I actually went back and then broke the characters down, and sort of then broke down their meanings of what they meant or meant in the book, and did that. So I actually did the poem first before I actually broke the characters down in it, on there. So it's one of those things that sort of, in my life, and I'm glad I've started it now, is sort of actually spark some creative juices in myself to sort of write some poems, and actually some, ones like this that actually sort of have some deep meaning.
Yeah, connection. That's interesting, because it leads right to the next comment. Dorothy mentions that in your presentation, you made such an excellent connection between the humans and the trees. And so that kind of fits right in with what you were talking about. You wrote the poem and then about the humans, and it all goes together in your presentation. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was neat, and I'm sure it was based on fact, but in the book that actually, what was it that man and plants actually share? I think it was 25% of their DNA. I mean, so that's a very good thing, that man is tied in with trees but the majority of humans do not realize that.
No.
Take it for granted. And, you know, man itself, and it's a sort of a bad thing to say, and being in the industry I am, I have the appreciation for it, but man tends to exploit a lot. And then at some point during exploitation of whether it's trees, coal, other natural resources, you know, at what point does man, you know, realize I'm doing something bad here? Or does legislation get created to say, we need to really slow down, maybe not stop what we're doing, but actually slow it down and tie all this in together, you know, to knowing that, you know, what we're doing here, we cannot keep plundering what we're doing with the earth. I'm a man that has a child and I have grandkids. And that's what most people need to think of, is just not what we are doing on this earth right now with everything around us, but it's what are we leaving, you know, for our descendants on there? Are we going to leave them an earth that is better or worse than what we have right now?
I don't know if you want to answer the next question, but it is.
Okay.
Do you want to put yourself in the middle of my HOA and people who don't want to blow the leaves off their yard? They want them just to stay there and regenerate the earth.
So I would say to that is, and this is what I do at my house, I do not bag my leaves. Now, it may mean that I'm out there every couple days as the leaves are falling, but I take my mower over and put it on the mulch setting, and I just run over those leaves and mulch everything back into the ground instead of leaves. If you just leave the leaves on top of the soil, they're not going to break down readily. And if you do have turf, you're not going to have turf next year. And the odds are, the way our winds blow, those leaves that you are leaving on your yard are going to end up in your neighbor's yard. And that's, you know, so that's where a lot of the gripe comes from, I think, with people on leaves. But absolutely, every time we rake leaves and remove them, we're doing injustice to our soil and our trees that are in our yard. Those leaves fall, it's, once again, they recycle into the ground. They're food for insects, funguses and stuff, and they add the nutrients back into the ground from which the tree took to set and make leaves, you know, earlier that year. So I would say, take the time, go out into your yard, enjoy being outside, and just mulch those leaves directly back into the ground, and just keep up on that until all the leaves are down and you're done with that process.
I will spread the word.
Okay.
A few more questions. Can you talk a little bit about the photos that are scrolling?
So knowing that a lot of this story was based up out of the Northwest and the old growth forests that have been plundered for years. And, you know, we can see it back in the times where, you know, the railroads were going across the country and they needed wood for the ties. The photos you see where they actually put a highway through the middle of a sequoia tree by cutting a hole through it and going through it. So in my travels to the national parks, I've actually been out, and these pictures that are streaming are actually from Sequoia National Park and Redwoods National Park. And so what we're seeing here is a lot of the trees that were being exploited in the book. And on the really giant sequoia trees, that is the, you know, the type of tree that they were actually trying to save until they were forced out of the tree. So I'm just sort of trying to, you know, tie in with the presentation of, you know, what the characters in the book, the setting that they were in these forests out there. It's sort of hard to say. There's one picture that goes by where there's a couple of sequoia trees side by side, and one of them actually has a burned area in it. Right in front of that burned area, there is a new tree growing. The tree actually looks very small, but the new tree that is in front of that one is actually between 20 and 30 feet tall. So when you think about that on the scale of these trees and how big that they are, it really puts us into perspective, really how special these trees are. If you ever head out to Sequoia National Park, the General Sherman is the largest known tree, on Earth right now. And it is just, it's extremely impressive. Out there, I always tell people, if you do not travel and go to the national parks, it's one of our greatest treasures to have. And places out west like Yosemite and the Redwoods and Sequoia, you just really have to take those in, if not once, multiple times in your life, to just really know how special these areas are. And really, thank goodness that a lot of them are set aside, as national parks, and they will never be cut down, by man again. And they're there for all of us in America and from several countries actually to come in and witness them and see how special that they are.
I see a road trip in my future.
Say that
Sounds
again.
good. I see a road trip in my future.
Okay, yes. I said, really, in what I do as a forester, I tell people, cherish the trees that you have here, plant them properly, do what you need to take care of them, because we are not California. I mean, we do not have to live to 1,000, 2,000 years old. If we're lucky, some of our old oaks can live a couple hundred years. Other ones that are in actually our native forest, the cross timbers forest that we have between Tulsa. And here's real quick, here's the picture I was talking about. The tree on the right-hand side, that green tree in front of that burn scar on that tree, that's 20 to 30 feet tall. So you're probably not even seeing 1/4 of that sequoia tree. So it sort of shows you the magnitude and the the majesty of what these trees are out there. But going back, the cross timbers forest that's between Tulsa and Oklahoma City, people drive it all the time. They probably just take it for granted that, hey, look at this scrub forest with all these small trees in there. A lot of those trees, even though they're not very big, are actually 300 to 400 years old, if not older. So it's a very special forest that we have. They're not very big because, once again, those trees are grown in a forest situation. And trees in a forest situation have a completely different growth habit because they cannot let their branches spread out. And so in our yards that we have in the cities, where you may plant that lone oak tree and it has all this room to grow and spread its branches out, that's really what people think of when they think of the mighty oak tree, is that it could be spreading 50 feet in every direction and it's this large tree, but it may not be that old. The ancient forest out Keystone actually had, it was the oldest known tree that we did have in Oklahoma at the time. It passed away in 2012, I believe, but it was over 500 years old on it. This slide here sort of represents a down tree and everything that's growing on it. You can see the moss, you see ferns growing on it. It's the forest sort of consuming, what it had actually had grown and lived. And now all the components in the forest are actually now growing on this and taking this down tree piece, back into the forest floor on it. So when I'm taking pictures, I'm just not taking pictures of the live things, but I also like taking unique pictures of nature and what it does. And that may mean that it's actually taking a picture of something like this right here, that's actually something that is dead itself, but it's full of life.
Two comments before we go. Tara mentions that the redwoods are one of her favorite places on earth. She's ready to go see them. And Teresa has a wonderful summary from all of us. Your slideshow, your shirt, your research, your poem, all show your passion for an excellent book discussion, and we thank you for that. Thank you so much, Mike, for being here. It's been wonderful. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for allowing me to come back after a couple of years after I did the Hidden Life of Trees. And anytime I can sort of do this and sort of spread the thing about the importance of trees and do it in the form of a book, because I'll admit I'm not an avid reader, but when times do come, I do read. And I am glad that I was approached with this book and actually took the time to read the 502 pages. That was a big undertaking for me, but I really greatly enjoyed it and had the pleasure of coming here and presenting it to you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.